Hey guys, welcome to Love, Sex, and Magic. Today's guest is the best-selling author of Mastering Your Mean Girl and Open Wide, and she is the host of the Melissa Ambrosini podcast, which I have been a guest on. She is my sister from across the globe. I am so excited to share this conversation with you. In this podcast episode, we talked all about conscious relationships. We talked about Melissa's story, how she went from performing in the Moulin Rouge to becoming a health coach. We talked all about the top tools that she uses in her relationship, in her marriage. We talked about triggers in a relationship, arguments, and how you can navigate conflict, and so much more. I'm so excited. Let's do this. Melissa Ambrosini, welcome.
Thank you for having me, beautiful girl. I'm so excited.
Oh my God, I'm so excited to jam with you on so many topics. And we've already just been catching up for the last half an hour. And yeah, I feel like you are a sister from another mister on the other side of the world. We've just been talking about how many things we have in common. Performing arts, struggled with food. We both trained at IIN, teaching about similar things. Your partner's called Nick, mine's called Rick. We have a lot of things in common. So, for people that don't know all about your story already, can you share with us your story and how you kind of got to where you are now?
Yes, absolutely. So, like you, I used to be in the performing arts. I started dancing when I was 3 and I was obsessed with it. I loved dancing. I loved being on stage. I loved performing. It was my happy place. And then when I got a bit older, I began doing acting and a bit of singing and different styles of dancing. So I started then adding in tap and hip hop and all these things. And I absolutely loved the freedom of being a performer. I loved because when you're on stage, and you know this, when you're on stage or when you're filming something, you're so present. You can't be in a performance and thinking about what so and so said to you last week. You're just in the moment. And I think that's why I loved it so much. I wouldn't have been able to articulate it back then because I didn't have the awareness that I have now. But I loved that feeling of presence, that pure presence. And during high school, I started working professionally as a dancer, actress, modeling, and I did TV presenting. And so, whilst most of my friends were partying on the weekends, I was working and I loved it. And we have this thing after year 12 here called schoolies. I'm not sure if you do something similar. It's where you kind of all go away for a week after you've finished your final exams and everyone just gets blind. And it's a week long, but I only ended up going for like 3 days because I was working already. And it didn't bother me. Like I didn't care. It's was something that I loved to do because it felt so good in my body. And then after I finished year 12, I got accepted into a performing arts college, which I think you did as well.
Yeah.
And I had to move cities. I had
Mm.
to move cities for that. So I had to fly. It was about an hour and a half flight from where I grew up, where my parents were, where my boyfriend at the time was, where all my friends were. And I had to leave that town and move to another big city, which was Sydney in Australia. And I did this year long performing arts course, which was Monday to Friday, like 9 till sometimes 10 o'clock at night. Think like center stage, that sort of thing. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I did night courses at the same time in acting just to really hone my skills. And then after that year, you audition for agencies. And I got into one of the best agencies and I began working professionally with that agency. So I did lots of acting, lots of dancing, lots of modeling and TV presenting. And then I did that for 2 years. And then I got accepted into the Moulin Rouge in Paris. And
That's
I moved to
incredible.
Paris. It was so fun. I was 20 at the time. I moved to Paris. I was like, "See you later, everybody." And I moved overseas to the other side of the world, and I began my career there, which I did for a year. And then after that, I moved to London because I went and visited my sister who was living there at the time, and I loved it. We went and saw Wicked on the West End. We had such a great time, and I thought, I'm going to move there and I'm going to try working there as a professional. And I moved there and I had a 2-year visa and I lived there and worked there and I loved it. I traveled so much all over Europe. I went to New York a few times for work. I was filming um, what are they called? Oh my goodness, the words. Like a short film. I did a short film
Mhm.
there and a TV series. And I loved it so much. And it lit me up. Then after my 2-year visa expired, I had to move back to Australia and I was devastated. I really didn't want to move home. I just, my heart was there. I'd built my career there. I'd built friends there. I was making such great money. I was traveling. And during this time, as well as working, I was partying. I was not nourishing my body. I
Mm.
thought canapes and champagne would suffice. I was on sleeping tablets for insomnia. I was on lots of prescription medication for my skin. So I was on like a really high dose of antibiotics for my skin, even though it wasn't that bad. Um, and I had a lot of destructive relationships in my life um, that weren't really, looking back, weren't the most supportive
Mm.
for me and my evolution. And then when I moved home, I was so down and depressed that I spiraled into depression. I came back to no job because I had to start from scratch again. And my friends that were my friends at the time didn't really want to be my friend anymore. The guy I was seeing dumped me. I had no job, no money, and I was living at my friend's house on her like fold out single bed in her lounge room
Mm.
and rent free. Thank goodness. She was so beautiful to kind of take me in. And the only way I knew to really cope was to party, was to go out on the weekend and numb the hole that I felt within myself, to
Mm.
numb the pain, to numb the sadness. And I'm writing 2 books this year, and I was writing about this the other day, so this story is quite fresh in my mind. But I remember one time the girl that I was living with, she was at work. She was a professional, so she had a corporate job. So she was out 9 to 5. So a majority of the day, it was just me at home trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. I had like a part time admin job entering data, which did not light up my soul one bit. And I remember crying most days on the bed, just crying and crying and crying. And one of my school friends called me, and she had battled depression in high school. And I didn't even really know what depression was. Like when, I found out she had depression in high school and she was on antidepressants, I didn't really get it. I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, it just means you're sad. You're just sad. And she was like, no, you're not just sad. And I'm like, what is it? And then when I experienced it, I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. I get it. And so she called me and she was like, I think you need to go and see someone and you need to go and do it today. And she's like, get up and go and book in to see someone. And so I just booked into like the local doctor. And she said, yes, I think you need to have some antidepressants and you need to see a therapist. And so she gave me 6 sessions to go and see a therapist. And that was the start of my spiritual journey in a therapist's office.
Oh
So
my gosh. Wait a minute. Okay, I just have to stop you there because already so many things in your story, I'm like, this sounds like a different version of my story. And what I'm hearing is like, you had so much going for you. You were so ambitious. You were achieving. You were working super hard. You were making money. You were performing, which is exactly what I was doing. And you went to the Moulin Rouge. I was in this soap opera, and this it feels to me like there's so much pressure that it needs to have an outlet. And if partying was for you, for me it was food, controlling and restricting and binging. It sounds to me as though, you can be chasing your dreams, you can be super ambitious, but if you are not slowing down and really taking care of your soul on a spiritual level, or taking care of your health, you're gonna have repercussions no matter what industry you're in.
Exactly. Exactly. And that was the big piece that I was missing, was self-love, was self-care, was
Mm,
I had no idea what self-love was. No idea. Like, if I knew, I wouldn't have trashed my body partying. If I knew, I wouldn't have eaten the things that I ate. If I knew, I wouldn't have surrounded myself with the people that I was surrounding myself with. And so it really is such a big key thing that you need to add to your life, is like self-care and self-love. And I had no idea that my self-love inner spiritual journey was going to begin when I went to my first therapy session. Now, this was clinical psychotherapy, so there's no crystals and incense in these therapy rooms. It's a very stale, windowless clinical setting. And she taught me about cognitive behavioral therapy.
mm,
And this opened Pandora's box for me. It was literally, it just opened Pandora's box. She helped me see so many things that I wasn't seeing. And it literally opened me up to yoga, meditation, spirituality, everything that I'm now love and obsessed with. And that's where my journey began. And
mm,
I literally took the antidepressants, took my 6 sessions, and I was like, okay, I've got to go with this. From there, it wasn't all rainbows and butterflies from that moment. I ended up in hospital a little bit after this. I ended up in hospital because of how I'd treated my body. My whole immune system ended up shutting down. I was in hospital for a week on a drip and on morphine and antibiotics and antivirals. And I was so unwell because of the way I'd treated my body. I got so many, I had so many different health issues. But the thing that kind of tipped me over the edge was, because my immune system was so low, I got the cold sore virus. And I had cold sores like all over my face, in my mouth, and down my throat. I couldn't eat, I couldn't talk, I couldn't open my mouth, nothing. And that was this wake up call that really put a firecracker up my butt. I was in that hospital bed. My mum was there, and my dad. And I just met, a few weeks before that, I met some beautiful new friends in yoga, in a Kundalini yoga class. And these three beautiful new friends sent me a care package to the hospital. They'd only just met me a few weeks before. And they sent me a care package, and there was crystals and herbs and angel cards and a book in there that changed my life. And that book was You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. And I remember reading this book and turning to my mom and being like, why didn't you tell me this? And she was like, Melissa, I was doing the best that I could. And I totally understand, she was doing the best that she could. But that literally sparked this Melissa 2.0 to kind of be birthed. I became obsessed with everything health, wellness, spirituality. I read every book. I went to every seminar. I did my yoga teacher training, my meditation teacher training. I became a health coach. I became a life coach. And I literally dove headfirst into this world because I started to feel good, and I started to feel whole and like me for the very first time in my life. And it wasn't a rainbows and butterflies journey.
Mm.
I One of the first things I did was I studied at IIN like you did,
Mm.
because I knew that health was the lowest hanging fruit. I didn't have my health. I was in hospital, so I knew that that's something that I needed to sort out. And whilst I was studying at IIN, I started this thing called a blog,
Oh, yes, I
and
remember.
yeah, I began sharing what I was learning. This was 9 years ago, and I began sharing what I was learning about my relationship with my body, about my relationship with food, and all these people were coming to me saying, "Oh, I thought I was the only one. I thought I
Mm.
was the only one who dealt with this or experienced that." And I began coaching clients. I realized that it wasn't just what we put in our mouth, it was what was going on up here. And I started to talk about my inner mean girl. People would stop me in the street and say, I thought I was the only one that had an inner mean girl. And then I began being asked to speak by Lululemon and Google as a motivational speaker. And I created online programs and meditations and ebooks. I got my first book deal, which was for this book here, Mastering Your Mean Girl. And then I started my podcast and wrote my second book, Open Wide, and married my soulmate and became a stepmama. And here I am now. I'm writing two books this year, and I've got my podcast. But that's kind of like a nutshell version of how I kind of got here and a bit about my
Mm.
story.
Oh, I love it so much. I think you really are just such a beautiful example and embodiment of someone who does the inner work and it shows on the outside. The deeper that you've dived in, the more beautiful your life becomes, the more different areas of your life start falling into place with the inner work that you do. And I know that it's not perfect, and I know that it's not, it wasn't just an easy ride. With all this stuff, you've really got to go to the darkest parts of yourself. Otherwise it's just love and light and it's not real and it doesn't work.
Exactly, exactly. And the thing is the work never ends.
Mm.
I think a lot of people look at you or I or Tony Robbins or Oprah and they think they don't have any stuff to work through or they're enlightened. We
No.
are still working through everything that comes up. We still have triggers, and I think that's a really important piece because I don't want people to listen to this and think, "Oh, well, now she's enlightened." No, I'm still
Mm.
working through stuff. We are evolving and growing all the time. That's why we're here on earth. If
Yeah.
we weren't growing, we're dying. And the reason we're here on earth in these earth suits in earth school is to grow and evolve. And once we get to that enlightened state, we leave this body. But whilst we're here in our earth suits, in earth school, we're learning.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the stuff that I really want to get into talking about today. I want to talk to you about relationships and intimacy because you have this beautiful relationship with your husband Nick, who is just seems like such a beautiful soul, and everyone should definitely go check him out, check his amazing music out, and he's got a podcast too, right? Yeah.
Yes, yes. So his podcast is called The Nick Broadhurst Show, and he's an incredible musician. So you can just look him up on
Mm.
Spotify, Nick Broadhurst.
Yeah, so I'd love if you could share the story of how you met and what your life was like when you were single before you met. Because I know that there's a lot of people listening to this that want to know about what a conscious relationship is. How do I get into one? How do I find a partner who is a match for that level of relationship? So let's take it back to like when you first met. Where were you at in your life? What kind of place were you in when you met him?
Okay, so Before we actually got together, we had met 3 years before that.
Mm.
So, we had met through mutual friends about 3 years before that, actually through my ex-boyfriend.
Okay.
And I was with my ex-boyfriend and he was with his ex-girlfriend, and we were both in those relationships for about 3 years. And
Mm.
so when we met, I thought, "Wow, he's really handsome." But that's kind of it, because when you're in a relationship and when he's in a relationship, like, that was it. I didn't really think anything of it, but I thought, "Wow, he's really handsome and he's really smart."
Mm.
I kind of thought, "What a good catch," like that sort of thing. And then I just left it. And he is such a loyal, serial monogamist. So, I was like, he's in that relationship, it didn't go any further than thinking anything else. And then we both found ourselves single at the same sort of time and kept on being put in the same room. So, like, at different events, different um, launches and spiritual events and things like that. And he had since, sorry, started dating another girl just for a little while, like maybe that like 2 months or something. And she actually, I knew her, and she said to him, "Melissa's your dream girl." And he was like, "Oh," like, he didn't really think anything of it, but he was like, "Oh, okay." And then they ended up dissolving very, very beautifully and consciously, not because of that reason, but just because their time together had been done. And I was single for the time before we got together, and so he had a bit of time too. And I dove really deep into self love, really
Mhm.
deep. I was living by myself, because I'd moved out of the place that I was living with my ex partner, and I spent a lot of time in meditation with crystals and my journal and reading David Dita and really feeling into the type of partnership that I wanted to call in.
Mm.
And so I did the list of the type of man that I want to call in. I highly recommend everyone reading The Way of the Superior Man and Dear Lover by David Dita.
Mm.
And they're such incredible books. And it's interesting because whilst I was single, I was reading Dear Lover and he was reading Way of the Superior Man, but we didn't know at that time. And so we're kind of both energetically tapping into what he talks about in those books. And so I was doing a lot of like visualizing, a lot of feeling into the type of man that I wanted. I did start dating this really nice guy for like a second. And I'm like, this could be good. Like, this could be mediocre. Like, I could have the white picket fence and I'd be okay. But my soul was like, this isn't it. This
Mm.
isn't your one. He's a lovely guy. And there was nothing wrong, like, nothing wrong he was a great guy. And I just was like, this isn't it. And so I spent a lot of time meditating. I had like crystals and I had my angel cards and I had my list of the type of man that I wanted. And I'd sleep with them under my pillow, just visualizing and manifesting, not out of desperation, just purely out of wanting to connect with that feeling. And I felt so at peace and whole within myself for the very first time in a lot, like, for the very first time ever. I'd
Mm.
never felt so whole and complete within myself. And I soon found out that Nick's felt the same way before we got together. Like, he felt very whole and very complete and the most him. And
Mm.
so what happens when two whole and complete people come together is that there's no void that needs filling. And just when there's no void that needs filling, it's just magic. So we got together and we were very open and honest. We spoke for hours, like 5 hours at a time. We'd sit on the beach and talk about everything. There was no putting on my best front. In past
Mm.
relationships, I'd put on like the better version of Melissa. And
Yeah.
then there wasn't that. Like, we were just so open and so honest from day one. I had nothing to hide. I was like, this is me. This is all of me, and take it or leave it type of thing. But we also spoke about being in an open relationship. We spoke about, not wanting to get married and not wanting to have kids, because that was the phase that I was at. Like, I was like, I don't really believe in marriage. Like, I don't really want to have kids. And um, I'm kind of open to an open relationship. And so we had no attachments. And he was
Mm,
exactly the same. So we had no attachments. So when two whole people come together with zero attachments, magic happens. I didn't know that that was the case, but magic just happened. And it's like we fully saw each other, and it was like home, coming home,
mm,
like we'd been together in many lives, which we soon found out we have been together in many lives. We've been brothers in past lives. We've been husband and wife in past lives,
wow.
things like that. Yeah, I've got some incredible stories that we've heard from different healers and psychics and things like that. And then, so we fully saw each other, and it was just like, ah, okay.
Mm,
And people had said to me before, when you know, you know. And I was like, whatever. That is the biggest load of BS.
yeah.
But when I met him, I was like, oh, this is what they're talking about. I know. This
Mm,
is, here's my one. And we fell in love, instantly fell in love, instantly. The first time I went and slept over, I never left. He proposed to me 2 weeks into that.
wow.
And we got married uh, 5 or 6 months later. And that was 7 years ago.
Wow, there's so much in there that's so fascinating and incredible. I love hearing you share this story. I didn't know the open relationship part. And to me, that's just like that again, it just suggests like we were so not attached that we were even open to a different style of relationship, which I think is that just kind of demonstrates just how at peace you were without needing someone else to be that other person. So I find that super interesting. And the fact that you went from being open to an open relationship to then suddenly, no, we're going to move in, we're falling in love, we're going to get married, like that's pretty fast going. But then when I think about it, like it's fast, but you didn't it's like you didn't just meet, you already had this awareness of each other's um, energies and souls. You'd kind of been orbiting each other for a while, which I think is really, really interesting. So it wasn't like you met a stranger and fell in love right away. You had been aware of each other's existence, which I think is different from just meeting someone, falling in love, getting married. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, totally, totally. And, we had so many mutual friends.
Mm.
The circles that we were mixing in, like, yeah, I did definitely feel like I knew him on such a soul level. And yeah, that's definitely how it kind of played out. But yeah, I haven't kind of said it like that, how you said, we were so open and not attached that we were considering an open relationship, to then falling, just like,
Yeah.
and I don't like to use the word falling, I like to use the word rising, like rising in love,
Mm.
um, and that definitely was the case.
I love that so much. It sounds pretty similar to the way I met Rick because when we met, we were both quite non-attached. We were both very much doing our own personal growth work. I had moved to Bali by myself to focus on self-love and healing. I was totally on my own adventure, like didn't know anyone, was totally on my own vibe, running my business, so happy. He was off in the States and Hawaii traveling doing a ton of work on himself. And when we were introduced, it was actually through, this is something else that's weird. So we were introduced through a lady called Jess, who was a clairvoyant. And she introduced him to me on the reading and said, you need to connect with this guy. So I went and then found him online and connected with him. But at that point, I thought, oh, this is just a work connection. Like, he's a filmmaker, he's hot, but like, I didn't see him as it's weird. I didn't see him as my type, but I think that's because my type was men that were emotionally unavailable, men that were not doing any spiritual work, men that were unhealthy or, not healthy partners. So when we met, it was like, yeah, this non-attached kind of like, we're just gonna be friends. Like we weren't even on that vibe until we suddenly got on that vibe. And then it was like, oh, we're in. Like this is it. So after that clicked, then it was pretty fast. So yeah, that's really interesting because I think a lot of people will debate whether it's good to like be slow or be fast. But I think, like you said, when you know, and it's good to just trust that and go with it. But if someone's kind of been in your space and you know of them, it's a little different than just meeting a complete stranger.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to tune in to what you guys are feeling. So if you're just going with the flow like you guys were and like we were just in flow. And inflow may have looked quote unquote fast to some people, but for us it was just in flow.
Mm,
And then for some people, their flow may look a bit slower, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's just their flow. And so it's really important that if you two are both on the same wave and your wave is a bit faster, then ride it. Don't like
mm,
be on a wave. It's like surfing and then wishing that it was slower. Like you just got to cruise that wave. And I think that's really important that you stay true to you. Like, don't let anyone else tell you that you've got to move at a certain speed. Don't listen to anyone
mm.
else. Only you and the other person in the relationship get to determine that. You get to
Yes.
determine how slow or fast you want to move. And I know people that were together for 15 years before they got engaged because they thought that was moving too fast.
Mm.
And so you just need to do what feels true for you. Let go of any societal dogma and just stay true to you and whoever the other person.
I think that's such good advice. For every single relationship, it's so different. And I think the worst thing you can do is force it. If there's like a part of you that feels like, oh, this isn't quite right, but I'm supposed to XYZ, we're supposed to move in together, we're supposed to be married by now, but there's something inside of you that's like, oh, this isn't quite right, then we have to listen to that. And like you said, there's so much pressure from society to tick off these boxes by a certain time, by a certain age. And yeah, you're so right. It's all about just listening and going with your own flow. And that's completely different for each couple. So you guys have been together for how long now? You've been married for, is it 8 years?
No, about we will November is 7 years. So
Mm,
we're in what are we in now? June. So
yeah.
yeah, November's 7 years.
Great. And I love how candidly you share that it's like, it's not perfect. It's not like you get married and then the end. Like the work continues. And I know both of you are really active in doing conscious relationship work within your relationship and as individuals. So I've heard you speak a lot about CCC and how important that is to you. Can you explain to us and talk us through what that is and what that entails?
Yeah, so I talk a lot about this in my second book, Open Wide, which the subtitle for that is A Radically Real Guide to Deep Love, Rocking Relationships, and Soulful Sex. And CCC stands for Crystal Clear Communication. And this was something that Nick and I developed very early on. I did something early on in our relationships called NVT, no, MVC, nonviolent communication. Have you ever heard of
Mhm.
that?
Yeah, yeah, I have.
Yeah, so I did the training in that, and mainly because I became a step parent. That's another thing that I haven't mentioned. So, when I got together with Nick, I instantly became a stepmom. So, the first time I met Leo, he was 5, and then when we actually got together, he was 7, and he's now 14. So it's been beautiful, that journey as well. But I initially went and did that nonviolent communication course because I was wanting to be the best parent I could be. But little did I know that that would be some things that I would use in all of my relationships. And so it didn't really resonate with me, especially the non-violent, like that terminology. And so Nick and I just started practicing this thing we called crystal clear communication, which is basically when you and your partner, or you can do it with a girlfriend or anyone, you sit, you be present with each other, you get present, you get into your heart space, and you don't start talking until you're in your heart. And then you communicate from here, from your heart space. And
Mm.
we always start crystal clear communication with, I feel, I feel sad because whatever. And we never start crystal clear communication with, you did this to me and you make me feel like that. That's not crystal clear communication. Crystal clear communication is about taking responsibility. And you
Mm.
take responsibility by starting the conversation with, I feel. Crystal clear communication is also, it's from that place of love. I always like to acknowledge Nick first. So what I call a love sandwich, I will love sandwich him. I'll say, um, I really notice how much effort you're making around the house, and I really want to acknowledge you for that. And then in the middle, it's, I feel not heard when I ask you to maybe do this, but I see that you're willing to try. So it's like you love sandwich it. And that's really what crystal clear communication is about. It's about speaking from love, and it's about taking responsibility, because so many people, they point the finger, and every time you point the finger, there's three fingers pointing right back at you. And I think if you want any relationship to thrive, if you want your relationship with your children, your relationship with your friends, your family, and your partner to thrive, you have to take responsibility for how you are showing up. You have to do your own inner work. Because in a partnership, especially, there's three entities. There's me that needs taking care of, Nick needs to take care of him, and then we both need to tend to our marriage and our partnership. And so that's three different entities that need love and nurture and energy and attention. But Nick can't do my work for me, and I can't do his work for him. I can be a very nice shiny mirror for him, and he can be a very nice shiny mirror for me, but I can't do it for him. And same with your children and your family and your friends as well. And so we really do need to take responsibility for how we are showing up and do the work. And that is when your relationships will really thrive.
I love that so much. Such a powerful tool. And yeah, I've not heard it communicated in that way, but it's very similar to what we do as well. Like, I think the most important thing is like speaking from your heart, because when you're just like in blaming and shaming, it doesn't actually ever move you anywhere. Shaming your partner for something that they have or haven't done or have or haven't said, it's never going to bring you into a closer, more intimate, loving relationship. It's just going to create resentment, which is like the death, like poison to a relationship, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think one of the beautiful things about Nick and I really want to encourage everybody listening, is to, when you have a level of awareness, you can see when things are kind of when the train tracks are kind of starting to veer off. And so that's when we are very quick to um, do the work, whether it's
Mm,
have a session with a therapist. One of the beautiful things that we have done is have couples therapy.
mm,
That's only something that we started this year, and we've only had a few sessions, and it's been amazing. It was actually, the reason why we did it was because we needed some tools. It was actually to do with our family dynamics. So with Leo coming, because Leo spends half his time with us, so we just needed some tools on how to kind of navigate this new environment, this new dynamic every 2 weeks when he comes, because I was feeling quite wobbly. So
mm.
that was really helpful. But and maybe you need, it's something else for you. It's something else for you. But couples therapy, highly recommend it. Highly,
Yeah.
highly recommend it for whatever you're going through. It's amazing.
Yeah, I would completely agree. We had a few sessions last year in London and found them to be so helpful, like just to get a third,
Mm.
to get a witness to just be there and hold space for both people so that you're not going round and round in circles. And for us, just the act of going together was like we're nourishing our relationship by doing this. So just the act of going together made us so much closer because it was like, look how responsible we are. Look how for our relationship we are.
Exactly. And you know what? It's like the universe, I say the universe has ears and it's listening to everything you say and think. And it's almost like when you do an act, like our sessions were an hour and a half. And it's like it made me feel like, oh, you really care. You really care about our relationship. Like that you're willing to take an hour and a half out of your afternoon to dedicate to our love. Like
Mm,
that's a really beautiful thing. And yeah, so I highly recommend that individually you do the work and then together you do the work. It's
mm.
so important.
And how do you guys balance, your leading your individual lives and having a lot going on as individuals versus what you do as a couple? Because obviously you spend a lot of time together, you have a lot of similar interests and hobbies, and you do a lot of projects together. I know you did that amazing open wide tour together. How do you balance that? Do you ever find that you're spending too much time together and you need a break, or spending too much time apart and need to devote more time to each other?
We've actually been in both of those boats. We've been in boats where we've spent too much time apart, and then we've been in boats where we've spent too much time together. Um, and I think it's really important to just become aware. Like when you do meditation, you become highly attuned and aware of when things start falling off the tracks, when the train starts veering off. And what we are quite good at now is pivoting and pivoting fast.
Mm.
And so when we can see, okay, we haven't spent enough time together. We used to have two homes in two separate cities, which was an hour and a half flight away. And so last year there was lots of time. We spent way too much time apart last year, way too much time. And so we pivoted and now we don't. So we've worked it out, we've pivoted. And then there's been times, obviously, yeah, where we've spent too much time um, together because we both work and live from home. Obviously, we live here. But yeah, we both work here and we actually, both of our offices are in the same space, which when we were building our dream home, I was like, can we have two separate offices? I think it's really important that we have two separate offices. But the way that the house was built, it just didn't allow for two separate offices. So we built a second floor and upstairs is the office and the music studio and everything. And it didn't work like that. So what we have now done is Nick now has a separate music studio at his parents' house. So his parents have a beautiful 30-acre property, and he has turned one of the rooms into a music studio there. So
Mm.
he now goes there every day, like at 7:30 in the morning, and comes back at about 12 o'clock. So I get to write, he gets to do his music, and that's really beautiful. We get to go and have our time to do our soul work. He writes music and he does everything he needs to do, and then I'm writing my books, and then we come back together. And then yeah, there is a lot of businesses that we have together, there's a lot of projects that we do together as well. So what we actually do and how we both work best is that we do our own soul work first thing in the morning. So for me, that's writing. For him, that's music. And then we kind of come together and we have other business meetings of anything that we're working on together. We have quite a few businesses together, companies that we've invested in together. So we tend to do that later in the day. And I think that's really important. And then setting healthy boundaries. I talk a lot about healthy boundaries in Open Wide. It's so important, not just with your partner, but you set healthy boundaries with your friends, with your family, with your children. Boundaries are so important. Healthy boundaries are what make you thrive. And so Nick and I have healthy boundaries that we've spoken about when we practice CCC. things like once it's dinner time, there's no more work talk. It's like, even though we love what we do and we can lay in bed and talk about work and ideas and different things we want to do and create all night,
Mm,
it's not the time and the place. Like,
yeah.
the time and the place for that is during work hours. And so for us, setting a boundary and making that a sacred space for connection and for us time is really
Mhm.
important. And he knows, especially for me, like I feel like it's more important for me. Um, and just setting that time in the evenings for lovers time, and then on the weekends, like, we do work on the weekends, but we will kind of say, okay, well, let's spend Saturday morning working, and then let's have lunch together, and then let's go for a walk and have time together Saturday afternoon, and then we might see some friends Saturday night or something like that. But I think
Mhm.
healthy boundaries are imperative in order for any relationship to thrive.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think for us as well, like whenever we get into a situation where we do feel like we're annoying each other or we're irritating each other, it's always because one of us or both of us has not honored our own soul time. We've not given enough to ourselves first. So we've tried to give from this, this place that's not full. Yeah, it's an everyday job. I really think it's an everyday job. Just out of interest, what do you know what yours and Nick's attachment styles are?
No, but this is so amazing because someone sent me a link this morning to the book Attached. Is this what
Mm.
you're referring to?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I've not read the book, and then they sent me the link to the book, and then she said, "Watch this YouTube video explaining this.
Mm.
I think you'd love it. You need to get this person on your podcast." So this is a friend of mine. So you are the
Yeah.
second person today that's told me. So I think that's a sign that I need to really look into this. So no, I don't know what our attachment
Mm.
styles are. What are yours?
So, I mean, the goal for both people, for both partners, is to become like securely attached, which means, you have a really
Yeah.
good balance, a really good sense of self, good boundaries, able to have intimacy and commitment and have your own space at the same time. But every person, depending on their childhood, will sway slightly towards one side than the other, and you'll always attract a partner who's the opposite. So it tends to be, and this is just from what I've read, I'm definitely no attachment expert, but this stuff fascinates me so much. But if you in the relationship are the one that tends to want more space, more boundaries, and tends to kind of be more like in a relationship would kind of be the one to kind of shut down, then you're naturally more on the avoidance side. But if you are on the opposite, you tend to want more closeness, you tend to kind of want to come together more. You can maybe be a little bit more if you're triggered, it might make you a bit more needy as opposed to shutting down because you want more connection, more intimacy. And you tend to need less space and want more togetherness. So there tends to always be this push and pull in a relationship dynamic. But the goal is for both people to gradually move more and more secure, so there's not this constant push and pull.
Can you be a bit of both?
Yeah, you can. You can definitely be a bit of both. I think that's called what's it called? It's called there's two different types of avoidant. There's dismissive avoidant and there's something else. It escapes me right now, but definitely read the book and definitely
Oh,
do
for
the
sure.
do the test. It's super interesting, and just helps you to really understand your patterns and dynamics in relationships and in conflict. It's just I found it really interesting, and I think it's helped me accept my own tendencies more as well. Because I would be
Yes,
more on the
and
anxious side, and Rick would be more on the avoidant side.
wow, that is so interesting. I cannot wait to dive deeper into that. It was when I was watching the YouTube video on it this morning, literally before I got on this call. The video was explaining that. there's lots of theories in attachment parenting where they say, leave your child, let them cry it out, let them be on their own, because otherwise you'll create a dependent, needy child. But the science is now showing that if you leave a child in a room and the parent is in there, so the child feels secure that the parent's there, the parent's just sitting there, not doing anything or saying anything, the child will freely play and just go about its day. But if the mother or the father leaves the room, the child will feel insecure and won't feel that sense of groundedness and freedom to be their whole self because they're uncertain.
Mm.
They don't feel secure. So I found that so fascinating, and I'm really interested to dive deeper into this. So thank you for mentioning that again today.
Yeah, my pleasure. What a yeah, it's when those synchronistic moments come, it's like, well, got to take the sign, got to take the hint. So you mentioned
Totally.
also with this like going apart, coming back together, I want to use this as a bridge to move into talking a little bit about masculine feminine dynamics because something that I learned when I started diving into this kind of topic was when you spend time away from each other, and then you come back together, it actually strengthens the polarity. So it makes the masculine makes the man, if you're in a heterosexual relationship, makes the man go more into his masculine, makes the woman go more into her feminine. So when they come back together, there's more polarity, which to me makes total sense because when you've been away from your partner, you come back together, you have the hottest sex ever. So I want to talk to you about this because I know you are someone that runs a hugely successful company. I think you have several companies. Your partner also is running several companies. You're both very busy. This is a lot of masculine energy every day, I can imagine. How do you balance that when you come back together in the evening and you want to like soften into your feminine?
I talk a lot about this in Open Wide. There's a whole chapter on reconnecting with what I call your God essence, which is your beautiful feminine essence that we all have within us. And it is really important. So, how I do it, because of just the simple act of being on a computer and writing and running a team, that is more of it requires more of my masculine energy. Yes,
Mm.
I have a big team. I have like 7 people that I manage that work for me and Nick. And it does require that energy. So what I do that really helps me is I always start my day in my feminine. So I start it with connection with Nick, with meditation, with breath work, with qigong, with yoga, with maybe going for a walk, in summer going for a swim. So I start my day in that energy. And then I get into my work, and then at lunchtime I usually will go and eat my lunch in the sun at the beach. I live right near the beach. So Nick and I will take our lunch and go and sit on the beach. So then I'm reconnecting back again with my feminine. I will go for a swim. We'll sit and we'll talk. The sun is on us. Mother Nature is so beautiful at reconnecting you back to your feminine God essence. And then I might go for a little beach walk, and then I'll come back, do some more work. And then again, I bookend my day with another meditation, again reconnecting to the feminine. And then I can go into the kitchen, and then being in the kitchen for me is very feminine. And then that's how I kind of transition, and then having a shower or something like that, maybe getting out of what I was wearing. But there's so many little things that you can do throughout your day to help counterbalance, because during the day we're kind of always like a pendulum. We're going from our masculine to our feminine to our masculine to our feminine, and it's not about being all in masculine or being all in feminine. It's about, like I was saying before, about pivoting and pivoting fast. And when you realize, oh, okay, maybe I'm way too much in my masculine right now, what do I need to do to come back more into my feminine? This is where awareness comes in. Or maybe I'm too feminine and I'm just kind of floating about and not getting anything done, and just
Mm.
kind of, really in the moment, which is beautiful, but like I need to kind of knuckle down and focus and get stuff done. So what do I need to do to be, more in, and to harness more of that masculine energy. And so I think for me, it's really about awareness. It's about pivoting and pivoting fast and doing these little things throughout your day to help you come back to the other side a bit more. So whatever it is for you, like for you, if it's being in nature, maybe 3 or 4 times throughout the day, you could take your shoes off and go and stand in the grass and just feel the sun on your skin, or whatever it is that makes you feel and connect back with your feminine god essence. Do that.
So good. And I think that's a really good, like just little pieces of advice where people can just slot in that God essence into their day, no matter how stressful or how far in their masculine they feel like they are at work. Oh,
Oh, I was going to say one more thing that I can't believe I forgot, which reconnects you with your feminine in 1 second, is dance.
mm,
So yeah, we always, before dinner, we have a dance. So we have like a rule, one song a day. And we will just pop on one song. And even if you don't feel like it, even if you're like, no, I don't want to, I can't be bothered, you do it. And so that also, like before we eat dinner, that kind of is like a pattern break. You know, Tony Robbins talks a lot about pattern breaks or
mm.
changing your state. And that's a great way to change your state so that you can get back into that feminine, okay, I'm a wife or I'm a mama or I'm a partner, whatever. And now it's time to step into that role.
I love that. And that's just brought back this imagery that I have of you and Nick dancing together, because sometimes you'll share a video and it just melts my entire heart into just like this puddle of love. And I'm just like, oh, that's the most beautiful thing. Melissa, what do you have currently going on? What do you have like coming up that's really exciting in your world?
Well, definitely my podcast, The Melissa Ambrosini Show, is lighting me up. I love it so much. I get to have amazing conversations like this. You have been on my podcast. I want everyone to go and listen to that one too, if they haven't. You are such a goddess. And I loved that conversation that we had.
Me too.
So that's definitely lighting me up. And this year I am writing, I've got 2 books that I've been working on. So one is called, actually I'm not sure I can say what it's called yet, but it's about purpose, and that's coming out in September. That's an Audible original. And then next year I've got another book coming out, a physical book, all about comparison,
Mm,
and that will be out in March next year. So that's really lighting me up, and um, that's what I've been working on.
amazing. And I love to finish with these 3 questions that I ask everyone. So, for love, sex, and magic, what do you love right now?
My husband.
Oh, you're such a cutie pie. Okay, and what turns you on?
Connection. Definitely connection with him, connection with anyone. Like when you are deep in a conversation with one of your friends and nothing else matters, and you're just looking in each other's eyes and you're just deep in a soulful conversation, that, oh, it's just magic. It's the best.
Yes. And that leads me to magic. When was the last time you felt magic?
Yesterday on the beach, I went for a beach walk, and it's winter here in Australia, yet it's beautiful bikini weather still. In the middle of the day, I'm swimming, and it was just one of those perfect blue sky days.
Mm.
And the waves were just rolling in, and the color of the water was that perfect turquoise. And you know, when you have those moments where you're just like, what? Like,
Yes.
is this real life? That was one of those moments. I get that a lot in nature. I get that a lot. It's just so beautiful. Mother Nature is so beautiful. We need to love her more. We need to respect her more. We need to give back to her more. We take, and then we dump.
Yeah.
So, and what I mean by that is we take so much from her and we expect so much, and then we just dump landfill right back in her. And we really do need to love and respect her and give back to her as best as we can. We need to treat her with way more love and respect. And because, look at what's happening in the world. She won't stand for it.
Mm. It's so true. And it's so interesting because every single person that I ask this question about magic to, it's always in nature in some form. It's
Oh,
always like,
wow.
oh, yesterday I was out and I saw these birds, or, I was at the beach, or the stars, or, it's always nature. And I think we need to remember that nature is magic. Um, she is spectacular. So, we're going to head and answer some more personal questions inside the Goddess Collective. But before we go, where can everyone come and find you and hang out and soak up all of your goodness?
Okay, so you can head to my website, that's melissaambrosini.com. And then on Instagram, just Melissa Ambrosini, and same on Facebook. I hang out a lot on Instagram, and I've got a Facebook group, obviously, which I spend a lot of time in there as well. And then my podcast and all my books and everything. But come and connect with me on Instagram. Send me a DM and tell me what you got out of this episode. I would love to meet you. I would love to connect with you. Connection's one of my favorite things, and I want to meet new people. So, like-minded people. So, come and connect.
Oh, thank you so much, Melissa. This has been so heartwarming for me to have this conversation with you.
Oh my gosh, me too, sister. I could talk to you for hours. I just need to get you and Rick to Australia, which it's my plan. I'm going to get you here one day.
Yeah, it's coming. It's definitely coming. You'll be our first port of call.
You have to. You have to come and stay with us. We would love that.
We would love that. I think our partners would get on so well as well.
Yes, Rick and Nick. I love it.
I know, it's
And
so
Mel
funny.
and Mel.
I know. Oh, talk to you soon, lovely. Okay.
Thank you, my darling.
Guys, I hope you loved that episode just as much as I did. If you want to dive deeper and get access to more questions answered that are personally submitted by you, come and join us inside the Goddess Collective, where we have monthly workshops, workbooks, a book club, and an amazing community ready to support your journey of personal and spiritual growth. So leave us a comment, leave us a review, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in our next episode. Bye for now.